Greetings and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ podcast. Today we're introducing a very special series called Jeff Milton, the forefather of the modern day LINEWATCH agent, with special guest AERR ELTRINGHAM, Class 441, and Old Patrol HQ's foremost historian on all things, Jeff Milton. He's a supervisory border patrol agent teaching operations at the academy. He's been researching Jeff Milton for over 20 years. Be ready to be amazed and boosted as we embrace our rich history, heritage, and legacy with a few shenanigans along the way. Come and listen. Good afternoon, Bear, and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ podcast.
Thanks, Gil. Appreciate it. How you been, man?
I have been busy, as I know you have, and I believe you're about to get busier.
We'll find out. My wife just said the other day, she was like, if they take off with this, are you ready for this? I was like, I don't know. I haven't thought about that far yet. I've been too busy trying to figure out how to get it in front of somebody.
Yeah. Well, I think things are going to come to pass, but let's start out. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the Border Patrol.
Okay, my name's SBPA ELTRINGHAM. I currently work at the Border Patrol Academy, and I started in the patrol back in 2000 after I had worked as a federal technician in Arizona. And just so happened that two National Guard pilots happened to walk into my office and they were talking about the Border Patrol. And I was like, what is that? And they were like, oh, it's Border Patrol. And I was like, okay, what's that? And they kind of told me a little bit about it. And I was like, what? Y'all get to do that? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, how do I sign up for this? Because it was really interesting because I grew up about 17 miles south of Lake Erie in Ohio and never heard of the Border Patrol. Went to Canada several times, growing up, and, you go through the port, you know about the port, but other than that, didn't know anything about the patrol. Was in the Navy in California for 4 years. We'd go down to Tijuana before we'd, deploy out of North Island or out of San Diego Harbor, and we'd head out and, never heard of the Border Patrol, moved to Arizona after I got out of the Navy to go work for DOD as a civilian. And that was the first time, I lived in Arizona for a couple of years in north of Tucson, before ever finding out about the Border Patrol. And it was actually two agents out of CAG that were the agents that I met. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we had gone to Rocky Point, gone to, yeah. We'd gone down into Mexico. We'd gone to, we'd go to Nogales and go to, eat and go out and shop and that kind of stuff. Never heard of the Border Patrol. There wasn't a lot of us back then. And I found out about it and was like, sign me up. So I got signed up and took the test. I went to the academy in 2000. I'm part of class number 441.
Mm. What's the class chant?
441, second to none.
Mm. That's funny because that's the second part to our chant. Getting it done, second to none. Class 313.
Nice. But graduated in November of 2000. Went to Naco when it was the Naco Border Patrol Station. Mm-hmm. Spent my first 8 years assigned to Naco. From that point, I did two more deployments, did one deployment, short deployment after 9/11, and then I did a longer deployment in 2004, did almost a year in Iraq because I was still in the Naval Reserve. Got back from that, one of my supervisors was like, hey, you should put in a memo to Sector. They're looking for somebody for PAO that does photography and stuff. I was like, all right. So I put in, went up to Sector, was supposed to be a 6-month detail. And the second day I was there, the Minutemen showed up in Naco, Arizona, and I became the subject matter expert at that point.
How about that?
And I got told by the chief. He said, yeah, your 6-month detail just went to a year. And then
funny how that works.
And then it was Operation Jumpstart kicked off and all that stuff. And I was part of helping build a huge public information office there in Tucson at the time, because we were kind of the epicenter of everything at that point. And we built a pretty big program. I've seen a lot of things come from the program that we started back in the day that they're light years beyond what we dreamed of at that point now, with like stratcoms and all that kind of thing. But it's kind of like being old granddad sitting on a porch being proud of your grandkids and going, yep, them are my grandkids right there.
Let me ask you real quick, what was the work like when you first reported to your first duty station?
It was line watch. It was cutting the line, spending time on it. We did an operation called Operation Washout when I was still on FTU, and we put 2 agents in every wash from Naco proper all the way to the San Pedro River.
Jeez.
And on midnight shift in the middle of winter.
Oh, they would love that.
We were chasing bodies everywhere. It was.
Did you have cold weather gear from the academy, or I knew it. I knew it.
Had a vest. That was about it. And then, it was kind of fun because it was just like it was trial by fire. I mean, at that point in those days, I mean, I remember when it was, it was $800 a month in Naco and that kind of thing. Nogales was bigger and Douglas was bigger. So, Naco and Sonoyta weren't getting as many apps, quote unquote. We had a lot of groups, but it was getting lumped into like the Douglas corridor or the Nogales corridor. It wasn't us. But it was kind of crazy because it was just, you'd start a midnight shift at 11 p.m. and you wouldn't leave until 2:00 in the afternoon the next day. There was that many bodies. I mean, it was just everything running rampant. Like I remember picking up like, this is a whole patrol. So
just say it, man.
I'd roll up to I had this nondescript F-250 single cab pickup truck painted, it was just a white pickup truck. And I'd be rolling to work and I would pull over by a wash and I would honk twice and bodies would pile in the back of my pickup truck. And I'd just drive to the station,
shoot,
roll into the station and just be like, hey, go through that door. And we had a trail that was west of our station that was like, we would literally open the back gate of the station fence and we would stand out there in the middle of that trail and just be like, turn left. It was just body, like we're trying to run bodies right next to the station.
Unbelievable.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, we had a lot of work. We were doing a lot of stuff, and it was long before like what they have today with consequence delivery and everything. It was dos dedos en dice, toca la luz, and toma la foto, and kick them back across the line and catch them again the same shift.
Yeah, there was no way you were going to hold on to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 bodies, right? I remember when we had to write memos. If you kept anybody in the cell longer than 4 hours, we had to explain that to somebody. And now we're running a full center of detentions and everything else that goes with it. So,
it's that paradigm shift in our careers. Just what those guys in the field are doing today, and like what we tell them when we're training them here is like, look, this too shall pass. Some things will change. Do you have it harder today than we had it when we were young in the patrol? Yeah, in some aspects you do have it harder today. Do you have it better today? Yeah, you didn't you have these gadgets and you have these new things that we've been able to work and develop over the years to make our job better and easier. Not so much easier to do, but to allow us to be able to do our job better. So the things that they're going to accomplish in their careers is going to be light years ahead of the things that I remember in mine or you would remember in yours. And I can say that purposefully because part of what I did when I was at PAO in Tucson was I got to meet a man by the name of Marion Russell. Marion Russell was 100 when I met him, and he was the oldest living Border Patrol agent at the time.
Oh my gosh.
He was class 18.
Jeez.
And we took him, he retired from Nogales the year I was born. We took him to Nogales Station and showed him around Mogadishu and the Death Star. Like,
He must have.
he was like, this is incredible. He goes, I could never imagine this. And I keep thinking about that and that experience and knowing that man at that time and going, if for some way I was able to reach 100 years old and go back to my original station that I was originally assigned to when I was the boot in the patrol, the way they do business and the way and the things that they have will just blow my mind at that point.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Great.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool to see where the patrol goes in the future.
Agreed. So, the way we met. Mm-hmm. So, I'm the old patrol guy. And mm-hmm. Initially, when I started out this whole project, it was to promote the history, heritage, and legacy of the patrol, mm-hmm. right? With a few shenanigans along the way. Also,
we've all done those.
a little bit. Also, it was to keep the thread of the old patrol connected to the new patrol. In other words, I believe that there's this strong thread there that goes from the very first patrol inspector all mm-hmm. the way through to the newest and youngest Border Patrol agent we have. What is that thread? That thread of, enforcement, sign cutting. We still got, as much as we can have this argument all day about old patrol versus new patrol, but I know for a fact there are sign cutters just as good now, in many ways even better. Oh my God, I got guys that can use technology along with their excellent sign cutting skills and can mm-hmm. track anything. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. Then you got your highwaymen that can sniff out dope before the dog even gets out of the damn truck. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that thread still is as strong as that ever was. We still got Border Patrol agents that are, I believe, fulfilling the oath, fulfilling the tradition, honoring our ancestors, right, and making them proud. And so, you can't do any of that, Bear, without stumbling and tripping over Jeff Milton.
Oh yeah, I think
you're going to introduce him to us, right? But just let me build this up for you. So I'm posting this stuff about Jeff Milton, and I got this guy named ELTRINGHAM getting a hold of me and saying, hey, you might have got this little detail wrong here. You might have gotten this little detail over here. Hey, you want to do this? And I started to realize I was talking to probably, and I'm going to say this, you don't have to agree with it, the foremost expert, okay, right now and I'll argue with it all day long. If you want to spend the next half hour of the podcast arguing, I will argue it with you. But the foremost expert on Jeff Milton, because you've earned it. You have been doing it for 20 years. So that's how you and I got together. So tell us about your dive into the world of Jeff Milton and why.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. I appreciate the compliment. Like I said, there are a lot of guys out there that there are some very, very respectable people that I respect deeply, who chase the history of the Border Patrol. That I hope that I can be part of that group by introducing this.
Well, I'll save the humility for you.
For me, I kind of came across Jeff Milton by accident, a couple different ways. So, luckily, I was stationed in Naco, Arizona, and I lived just south of Sierra. Well, first I lived in Sierra Vista, and then after that, I lived down in Hereford, in the mountains and stuff like that. And I would start to look at some of the old maps, and I started looking at some of the Forest Service maps and stuff like that, and I would see the old canyons. And I've always been really interested in history and the history. The history of the Southwest is so cool because it's not like Greek history. It's not like Roman history. It's not like European history. Like you got, the Greeks and the Romans, like that's ancient history, and then you have the Europeans, like that's the Middle Ages. And then you go to the East Coast of, the United States, and you have the founding of our country and that kind of stuff, and the revolution and those characters, and that you go to the Southwest, you can touch history.
Yes.
You can
I
reach
love
out
it.
and touch it. You can stand there and go, okay, this is where Geronimo surrendered in Skeleton Canyon. And I'm riding my horse in here on horse patrol one night. And I'm like,
Oh,
I wonder why. Oh, here's why. Because he had the tactical advantage. I can stand where Geronimo stood. I can go to Fort Huachuca, and I can see the Buffalo Soldiers, the original parade grounds and things like that. So that kind of stuff always got me.
yeah.
Like the history. Well, stupid me. Okay, Tombstone's like 20 miles away. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's go to Tombstone. Why not? And I had been to Tombstone on multiple occasions. I lived in Tucson prior to joining the patrol. So I had ridden my motorcycle down, been part of like motorcycle runs to Tombstone and different things like that. Been there several times, but I'd never really kicked off and kind of learned a little bit about Tombstone. Funny fact: when I joined the Navy, the year I joined the Navy is the year that Tombstone came out. And I remember going and seeing that movie about 8 times when I was in egg school.
Yeah.
In Tennessee.
Still can't get enough of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the paths cross of the Earps and Milton and all these characters at this time, and it's like so close you can touch it, you can. But I remember going to I think it was Eldorado days one time, and I went to the Tombstone courthouse, and inside there upstairs you can go in there and there's actually a display about Jeff Milton. I was like, oh, and it said, this is like 2003-ish, and I'm like, effectively the first Border Patrol agent. And I was like, I'm a Border Patrol agent. It's kind of cool. Well, then it was like, okay, who is this dude? And then I went and they were like, oh yeah, his house is literally right down that street.
Yeah.
I went by his house. I've got pictures of his house, and it's still there in Tombstone. Yes. It's got a sign. It says Jeff Milton House.
Yeah, I've been there recently.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
It's amazing. Just standing there, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I really want us to be able to like change that sign out front. That's the old faded wood one that talks about him a little bit, and actually like put a real good one there. But
hint the Tucson sector, right? I mean, because that's a no-brainer.
There's several things that are hint to Tucson sector, and I guess as we go through a lot of this, we could probably tie a lot of things into a lot of different places as we go through his life.
Yes.
I can talk to stations, I can talk to AORs, I can talk to where he was and what he did and who he worked with and things along those lines, and we'll get into that kind of thing through this process. But
this kicked off a 20-year
it's
journey.
Like I said, it's 2023, and I was texting you the other day, and I was like, dude, I just realized I've been doing this for about 20 years chasing this thing. It's like, wow. Well, it was really kind of funny because like when I was in PAO in Tucson, I asked Marion Russell when I knew him, I said, sir, did you ever meet Jeff Milton? And he goes, oh yeah, we would go by his house and have coffee.
Oh, wow.
The old patrollers used to take care of him when he was old. So it was very interesting because Marion Russell was assigned to Douglas and Naco both, and would meet with him like when he lived in Tombstone.
Jeez.
So, and then later the old patrol, the old patrollers would take care of him when he finally, went to Tucson when his health declined very bad in his final years, and he lived up in Tucson. The old patrollers would come by and bring him and Mrs. Milton, like they would come by and visit, have coffee and different things. And I've read lots of different things about that. But I guess the whole thing, kind of kicked off at Eldorado days at like 2003. Like I said, I went to the courthouse and saw that and was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm a Border Patrol agent. I want to know how this is. and then, meeting Marion Russell and asking him, and probably the biggest portion of it was a buddy of mine. And this is an incredible story. Friend of mine, his name is Stuart Reed, James Stuart Reed. He retired as the DPAC of Medellin Falls up in Washington State. He and I were agents together in NACO back in the day, way back in the early 2000s. And then he went to Deming and I went to Sector. And then when I got back, I promoted, and I promoted up to Lordsburg as a soup. Mm-hmm. He had come over because he's from Cliff, New Mexico. And we met up again, and it was just like he's one of my best friends. And we've kept in touch, and like, he lives over in Silver City, and I'm here in Artesia, and we talk and all that stuff still to this day. But I was working as part of like the branch liaison group as a soup. And I went to a meeting with a lady by the name of Wendy Glenn. Warner and Wendy Glenn ran the Malpai Ranch down off of Geronimo Trail. They used to actually run John Slaughter's ranch east of Douglas. And then they had their own, it's called the Malpai Ranch. They had a group that they had of local ranchers that would get together and things like that. And they invited the Border Patrol down. We operated in that area quite a bit, coming down and doing things right along the seam between El Paso and Tucson Sector. We ran a big operation called Operation Border Jaguar down there for quite a while. It was the precursor to the current like hard camps and stuff like that were out there. We were out there in like FEMA trailers and tents. But I met Wendy Glenn, and she gave me a book that was written by a guy. Can't remember his first name. It's called 100 Years of Horse Tracks, and it's about the Diamond A's Ranch. And the Diamond A's is basically the boot heel it used to be the whole boot heel in New Mexico. It's about half the boot heel in New Mexico now. Last I knew, it was like 690 sections, which is 690 square miles of ranch land. And she gave me a book on that, so I was reading it. And it was really interesting. It was about the Gray Ranch and all that stuff. So it's feeding into all this history that I love, and like I said, I'd been tidbitting here and there about Jeff Milton and kind of looking at different stuff. And so I had that book, and it was sitting on my desk at work. And I came into work one night, and it was missing. And I was like, who stole my book? I'm going to cut somebody, like stab somebody with a spoon, because it's going to hurt more. Well, I found out it was my buddy Dirt, Stuart. We call him Dirt. So Dirt had taken my book, and he's like, hey, I wanted to read that. So I went in his office, and I stole a book off his desk. Well, it was called A Good Man with a Gun. And it was the life story it was the autobiography of Jeff Milton. Yeah, that's the one right there. Hey, here's my copy. This is the one right here. So
I had to kill somebody to get this one.
It's just about anymore. It's been out of print for a long time.
Yeah.
You gotta, if you're, to anybody out there that wants to know about this stuff, if you want to find out, you're going to have to go on things like Amazon, eBay, Abe Books, things like that. And you're going to pay through the nose for these.
Yeah, get ready to pay a little bit of money for it.
You're going to pay some. Some of them are in the $50 range. Some of them are in the $500, $800 range I've seen. And there's some reasons behind that. And I'll show you, when we get to it, I'll show you mine.
Okay.
So I stole his book and I read it and I was like, and I was like, man, this is crazy. So I started really looking at things and digging into it. And I called, when I got to headquarters, I started really like, why are we not like, I'd talked to Chief Blanco, I talked to Cliff Gill, I talked to these guys, and I'm like, who's the first Border Patrol agent? And I actually talked to the lady that used to be the CBP historian about this and was like, hey, and she was like, yeah. And the more I dug, the more I found, like, I would say that J. Evans Haley, his research on, there's two reasons I go with a lot of what J. Evans Haley says versus a lot of the other things that I find on the internet. And I think that's part of correcting the record.
Yes.
Getting the real correct, right information out there about him and who he is and was. Because there's so much, it's not bad, like it's not detractors, it's just not quite correct information.
It's a bit embellished, and it doesn't need to be. This man's life is so beyond extraordinary and exemplary. You don't have to exaggerate it.
Yeah, you don't. I talked about, like, one of the things, like when we were kind of talking about doing this podcast, one of the things was Jeff Milton's probably the most famous, unfamous lawman you've ever heard of.
Yes. And you know why? Because he didn't get an OK Corral.
Nope.
Right. Exactly. He got the Fairbanks shooting, which was one thing, but he didn't get an OK Corral. And that's really the main reason why we know who Wyatt Earp is.
Oh, yeah. And he did not think very highly of them.
Well, tease him, but don't share it. Don't share it.
Exactly.
Because I want to get it. The next thing I want to do is get into, okay, so we have come into a segment of our culture now, or a segment of time in the patrol, where not a lot of people know who Jeff Milton is.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's part of the goal of this podcast, is to introduce him to our current modern Border Patrol agents, right? I call him the father of the modern day line watch agent, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. Mm-mm. And from the top echelons in DC down to the most nug. We don't say nug anymore. Yeah. But to the most nug agent, we're going to introduce them to Jeff Milton.
Yeah.
So if you're done talking about your walk, if you have anything more to add about your development into him before you start talking about him properly, you can keep going.
I was gonna say, just to kind of tie it up, I actually asked my buddy the other day. I asked Mr. Reed the other day. I said, "Hey, how did you hear about Jeff Milton?" He goes, "Carl and Larry were talking about it," and I overheard them saying he was the first Border Patrol agent, and somebody had a book, and so I went and got the book off like eBay or something. He goes, and I read about him. I was like, that's pretty awesome. And Larry was a guy by the name of Larry Jurdy, who was BORTAC Class 1. And the other guy was a guy by the name of Carl Norton. And Carl Norton and Larry Jurdy and a guy by the name of Esker Mayberry are pretty legendary individuals in the United States Border Patrol. They're all three retired now. Yeah. Actually, Larry has passed away. Mm-hmm. But some of the stories of those men are legendary. And when they're talking about a guy that they respected and they thought was a legend, I was like, okay, we got to sit up and take notice of this. And
absolutely right. And just to add a little controversy to the mix, Joe Banco, and who is our U.S. Border Patrol resident historian extraordinaire.
Yes.
And I chastised the Border Patrol Academy for not having his books in their library and issuing the first volume to every single new Border Patrol agent that comes through. So that's one thing. Secondly, Cliff Gill, right? He takes issue when you say he's the very first Border Patrol agent, and we'll explain why later. Don't get into it.
Right.
Because I want to leave that as a teaser. So, because again, I'm hoping that one day all four of us will be sitting in the same Zoom podcast talking about this whole subject after we have laid the groundwork in this podcast.
Well, the other part of that too that's really cool is Cliff was professional enough and was willing to say, okay, here we are. Because I can't reconcile this, I can't say this, but he's the guy that came up with the idea that we're going to be talking about.
Yes, and to Cliff's credit, the thing about I can't call him the resident historian extraordinaire because Joe already has that title. Right. But Cliff, in his own right, is a magnificent U.S. Border Patrol historian. Number one. Yes. Number two, he's such a stickler for the actual factual information,
and has found so much.
And that's his integrity, right? Like you talking about through
exactly.
his access to the National Archives, what this man has done. And here's the thing that the Border Patrol needs to recognize, that these two gentlemen, and I'm going to add you to the mix too, because
there's one other you should probably add in there when we're done.
Okay. That if we better take advantage of these resources to really enrich our patrol and infuse in every single one of us, those of us that know, and we feel pride, we feel just this sense of greatness that comes from our heritage. But we need to use you guys to infuse into our patrol right now their heritage. Where did they come from? What did they develop from? What were they created to do? And see the men and the women who've come along through the years and have upheld, right? Upheld the patrol and have honored our history, heritage, and legacy.
Yeah. Another one I would throw into that whole thing is probably a guy that influenced both of those men, and that would be a guy by the name of Riley Hambeck.
Okay.
Riley was, I know when Riley retired from the Border Patrol Academy, they took 5 pickup truckloads of stuff that he had to the academy, to the museum.
Historical stuff.
Yep.
Wow.
That at the time nobody took, and nobody took over, and that's, it's sad, but it's cool because it's there. I know David is going to be, now he's the keeper of all that. Prior to that,
David?
David Hand, the director of the museum there.
Oh, okay, yes.
Before that, the curator of the museum was Mrs. Tisdale, Brenda Tisdale. I mean, talk about Mama Border Patrol. That lady, she was all about us, and affecting everybody she could make listen to her, understand who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do, and who came prior to us,
All right. So, well, I can already hear a bunch of PAs going, you going to talk about Jeff Milton or what?
All right. Who is Jeff?
Tell us, who is Jeff Milton?
All right. So Jeff Milton, just a little bit of overview on him.
Yeah. Jefferson Davis Milton.
Jefferson Davis Milton was born in 1861 as the youngest son of the governor of Florida during the Civil War.
So not DeSantis?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. And he was the son of John Milton. He was born in a place called Marianna, Florida. And yes, at the time, his father. I want to lay all these things out because I don't want anybody to get offended. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want any background, any of that kind of stuff. But his father owned a place called Sylvania, and it was a plantation. It was a cotton plantation.
Okay.
They owned slaves.
History is history, my friend.
It is. It's what it is. The house is no longer there. The house burned down not long after the Civil War. And his mother raised him and some of his other siblings in the one-room schoolhouse that was on the plantation, that was there for both the kids of the area and the slave kids. Like, they actually, are the freed slave children. They would come there and learn. And so he was born running around the swamps of, the panhandle of Florida. Which is, interestingly enough, somewhere, I believe, close to where Chief Bonko lives now. As far as I know, he's up there in Northwest Florida after he retired. But so he was born there. About the age of, I want to say around 15, he left home. There wasn't a lot going for him there. Like, it was after the Civil War. It was after, there was a lot of the Reconstruction, going on post Civil War and that kind of thing. And his options weren't, grand. So he wanted to do what every young boy wants to do and go live a life of adventure. And his sister was married to a man who lived in Texas. So he went to Texas. He went to a town called Navasota, Texas, which is, I believe it's in between Houston and Austin, if I'm not mistaken. Houston, Austin, Waco area kind of thing.
Okay.
And his brother and another man had a company where they had like mercantile stores in different areas. And he worked for his brother-in-law for a little while. And actually, I've found one of the buildings that was one of the stores in one of those towns.
You traveled there?
I haven't traveled there yet, but
but you found where it is, yeah.
The building's still there, and it's still on the road there. It's like, I'm like, oh, here we go, another adventure.
Yeah.
So he went from there, did that for a couple years, and then got the hair of want to go be a cowboy. So he went to West Texas and worked for cowboying for the Sawhorn Cattle Company, and did that for the season. When the season ended, he wasn't one of the full-time hands that stayed at the ranch, so he went back to Navasota, and then did a little bit more of that. Decided cowboying wasn't what he really wanted to do. He worked at the Huntsville prison, and somebody told him that they were hiring Texas Rangers. And so at the ripe old age of 18,
well, before you move into that, that segment just before he joined the Texas Rangers was that famous bank incident, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So he had gotten paid, and he deposited his paycheck into a bank account in the bank in town. And come time he wanted to draw a check on his money, and he went, and the bank was closed. And so he checked with the town marshal, and the town marshal was like, yeah, they're closed forever. And he's like, well, they got my money. And he said, they got everybody's money.
Yeah.
And he said, well, about that time, I believe it was the town marshal or whatever it was. He said, well, them men are going to be coming out the back door here pretty soon, so you might want to have a conversation with them. So they came down out of the building, and he stepped out from behind the building, and he said, hey, how y'all doing? Where's my money? And they said, well, we don't, And he goes, you're going to have my money.
Uh-huh.
And amazingly, between them, they were able to come up with his money at gunpoint.
at gunpoint, that's right. But you know what? He had the honor of writing them a check.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what he said when people were asking him right there. They're cashing my check.
Exactly. They cashed my check.
They cashed my check.
So yeah, that was one of the interesting.
That's a great story.
It's just like, I'm not robbing you. I'm just getting what's mine.
That's right. I'm cashing my check because I know the money's here because I deposited it just 2 days ago. So I know the money's in that bank, and that's a dang good story. So now, right? He that wasn't enough for him. That life was not enough for him. He is looking at the Texas Rangers at the ripe old age of 18.
Yeah.
Now, why would they even believe, Bear, that he was older than that?
El bigote.
Oh, the big Movember mustache, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He grew quite the manly mustache there, and headed down with a couple of letters of recommendation from some prominent citizens to Austin to apply to be a Texas Ranger, and walked in, and they asked him if he was 17, or they asked him if he was 21. He said yes. And the story goes that if they'd have made him swear an oath, he said his Southern honor wouldn't allow him to actually. Yeah,
it would have been strained a little too much. Yes.
Yeah, it strained him a little bit much, but they said even the guy that hired him was like, "You don't look 21." He says, "But you look like you'll be a good ranger." So from there, they sent him down to just outside of town to the Ranger encampment with Company B of
Real quick though, good thing there wasn't a polygraph then, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, is not to have a polygraph on that one. But yeah, he joined the Texas Rangers, and arranging he did go. Like he definitely found a spot there with the Rangers on the frontier, the staked frontier, and there's a lot that went on from that point forward. I mean, it's kind of cool because I was sitting there reading, and I don't know if you know who. Do you know who Johnny Magdaleno is out of Yuma?
No.
Okay, Johnny, he's retired now. Johnny was my one of my instructors for TTC when I went through TTC as a soup. Him and a guy by the name of Jim Bunner, and both of them are retired now. And another guy by the name of Arnold was out of. So Jim Bunner was out of Whitefish, Montana. Johnny Maggs was out of Yuma, and Arnold was out of. I want to say he was out of Alamogordo at the time.
Okay.
Those guys were my TTC instructors when I became a soup. Well, through the years, Johnny and I kind of kept in touch. And when I worked at the ATC up in Harper's Ferry, he would come up and still do and still instruct as a for TTC courses for new soups. And it was really, we got interested in talking back and forth about Jeff Milton a little bit. And I showed him my book, and he was like, "Hey dude, could I borrow that?" And I was like, "Sure." So I let him borrow my book, and him and my boss, another guy by the name of Damian Higbee, we all sat down one day and started talking about like all the jobs that Jeff Milton held in his lifetime. And it was kind of cool because I wrote them all down, and I keep them just to kind of give. And I want to kind of tease this out a little bit so that people kind of get an idea of the colorful life that this guy, like starting with the Texas Rangers was just the beginning, like in the prison guard and things like that. Like the things that he did that weren't law enforcement were like, he was a shopkeeper for his brother-in-law. He was a cowboy, later on, after he left the Rangers, he was a cattle rancher, and a homesteader. And I've actually found where his homestead was here in New Mexico. He owned a saloon at one point for just a short period of time.
15 minutes.
Yeah, about 15 minutes. Didn't want to shoot people. So he was like, "Nah, I'm good." He was a prospector I found the Milton mine in Arizona. He was a wildcatter for oil in Texas, and he found some phosphate down in Mexico when he was traveling on his route that he used to take when he would ride the line. Mm-hmm. As we get into later on, we'll talk about what his route was, but he was a railroad foreman and conductor. He was also an expedition guide. And then you start getting into the things that he did in law enforcement. You're like, he was a prison guard. He was a Texas Ranger. He was a customs inspector. He was an outlaw tracker. He was the chief of the El Paso Police Department. For all you guys that live in Chuco, this is the OG for your PD there in Chuco.
How about that?
And I've seen a picture of the badge that he had and the gun that he had. He was a bounty hunter. He was a range detective for the New Mexico Cattle Association. He was a deputy sheriff in Socorro County, New Mexico, Cochise County, Arizona, Pima County, Arizona. He was a deputy U.S. Marshal in the Arizona Territory in the 1800s.
Jeez.
He was an immigrant inspector. He was a Chinese mounted inspector. He was a deportee escort, which means, guess what? He did ERO's job.
How about that? So he might be the father of ERO too.
Right? And he was an Arizona Ranger. Like he did all these things that you look at and go, what a colorful life. And it talks about in the book of his autobiography is like, he never owned much. He basically owned the land that he covered when he stood on it, and that was about it. There wasn't a whole lot that he owned, but he was just an amazing person that, like you said, never got Hollywood's attention.
Well, the thing about it is, right, is that J. Everett Haley calls him a good man with a gun. And that's
Yeah.
what he was known as. That's what he became known as. And I'll add to that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, too, one of the reasons I say that he is the forefather of the modern day line watch agent is because for over 2 years, he took a couple of pack horses and rode the line.
Yeah. Oh,
Rode the line there in Arizona.
Yeah, that was the thing that started most of my thought process on him, and trying to figure out how to bring him back to the collective memory of the Border Patrol, and being like, hey, because I had conversations with B1, B2, B3 on, and not the current B1, like previous B1s.
Yes.
2 of them. B3s, hey, who's the first Border Patrol agent? Somebody be like, oh, Dougie Wright. I'm like, no, Dougie Wright was friends with this guy,
yes.
And it's really
our
cool.
Original Border Patrol agents were trained by Jeff Milton. So there's more than just that connection, right? So there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I can pull up, documents, I can pull up. And that's the thing, is like, there's only so much that's in the National Archives.
Right.
Like, in the National Archives is his service record,
right.
which shows he was not ever a Border Patrol agent. He never was a Border Patrol agent.
Well, some people say that about me right now.
Me too. Like, that never worked. That guy didn't work.
But hey, Bear, you know what? We're gonna wind down because I don't want this to get too long as we begin, right? Yeah. But I want to make 2 points. Number one, our contention is, if this man is not officially the first Border Patrol agent in the history of the Border Patrol, he should be. Wink, wink.
Right.
Secondly, he's so much like a PA.
Oh,
right. Almost every PA had all kinds of hustles before they became Border Patrol agents, and have all kinds of hustles even after they become Border Patrol agents, right? And the thing about it is, Wyatt Earp was known for many things outside of law enforcement as well, and part of those were practically criminal.
Yeah.
So but Jeff Milton never. He had, and I guess I could call it that now, an exaggerated code of honor, code of ethics. Someone might say, well, he lied about his age, didn't he? Well, yes, he did. But he did it to become one of the best Texas Rangers in the history of the Texas Rangers. And not only that, I think the rest of his record makes up for that one little lie that got him in the door. Right. And I honestly believe that some of our best Border Patrol agents out there have a few skeletons in their closet that they might, but are the best exemplary agents we have. So with the few minutes we have left, and trust me, we're going to treat this subject and we're going to paint the picture of Jeff Milton the way it needs to be painted. And you are the artist, my friend. I'm just holding the page up for you to write on it. Tell us what you're
painting.
Well, with crayon. Well, I use crayons. I'm a jarhead. So, what can we expect in the subsequent podcast from this point on?
I think a lot of what it's going to be is like a couple of things. Let's talk about like just take it step by step. Like, yeah, we talked a little bit about when he was young, and let's talk a little bit about the next phase of his life, and then tying in to agents, places that he worked.
Yes.
And dude, he worked your AOR. That was one of the coolest things, was when I went to that museum, and because I had talked to the people at that museum for several years. Actually, I was just about to call him the other day, and I haven't had a chance to. Mr. McFarland, but who's the curator of the J. Everett Haley Museum, and and it's not just Jeff Milton that they house. Like, they house him, but they house lots of different stories about Texas. If you're a proud Texan, you might want to go visit that place, because it's one of the 3 original and the only surviving bell from the Alamo is in that museum, and you can go look at it.
And that, yes.
That's cool.
Yes.
You know, but they have this little kind of shrine in their museum to Jeff Milton, because Jeff Milton he became friends with them. But what was really kind of cool was some of the artwork that I do. I actually donated a couple pieces of artwork, and one of the really awesome things was I had been doing a class that I'd been teaching a class for headquarters down at Big Bend. And I grabbed one of their coins, and I took a day of leave, and I went up to that museum, and I spent some time there, and I dropped the coin from Big Bend, Texas, in that little thing that they have, because that's where he kind of got his start, was in the Big Bend area.
Okay.
So it's one of those where it's like, hey, they need to, know that they got that. Couple real cool, quick things. One of the really interesting things that I found and figured out not long ago, that guy, Stuart Reed, his grandfather, his name was Blue Rice, and he homesteaded the rice ranch in the Mogollon of New Mexico, the Mogollon range of New Mexico. And he came from West Texas. And I found a letter in the historical archives of that museum that was from his Stuart Reed's great-grandfather, about him meeting and getting to know Jeff Milton when he was a Texas Ranger. And I was able to connect that point to another PA, and he didn't even know about it. And he's the guy that I found the book from.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He'd never put the footnotes and all that stuff together. But now he could say, my great-grandfather knew the dude that we look at as kind of, that we're trying to
the guy that you and I, even if Chris doesn't like it, the first Border Patrol agent, right? And see, that's the point I really want to get across, Bear, is the fact that this isn't abstract history over across the ocean or someplace right there. Even today, when I posted my last post about Jeff Milton, somebody said, just like you, I was on the horse patrol and I was riding this area that I know Jeff Milton patrolled. And he goes, and I feel like I was riding along in his footsteps. Yeah. And I said to him, brother, you were.
Right.
You were. Right. Yeah. And that so we can go back to stations, we can go back to AORs, we can go back to real physical places that still exist, Bear, that this man spilled his blood, sweat, and tears in, and he did it impeccably with honor, even though
he was never asked.
He had an accidental discharge.
Yeah,
right. Which that's the greatest, one of the best jokes in the patrol. And number two, he had allegations written against him but he had citizen complaints.
Oh yeah, and his citizen complaints went to the president of the United States. They didn't go to the chief. Yeah, they didn't go to the sector. They didn't go to any. That dude wrote a letter to the president of the United States.
That's right. And what did we say about that, Bear? If you don't get alligated against,
you ain't doing your job.
You ain't doing your damn job. You did all right.
One last real cool thing.
Tell me.
We talked about this book, right?
Yes.
It's like the grail for the Border Patrol, I would think. It's been out of print for a lot of years.
Yes.
I have 3 first edition, first print of these books.
You know it's Christmas soon, don't you? And nobody loves you like I do except your wife.
So I have some really cool things. Every one of them is signed. One of them is signed by the author and the illustrator. Ooh. One is signed by the author and Mr. Milton's wife. And this one is signed by Jeff Milton's wife. So this is kind of cool. This is the first edition, first print, signed by his wife,
Mildred. Oh really, my gosh!
This is I don't even know if I've showed you this one, Gil.
I'm holding my breath here.
I got this book after I moved from Silver City, New Mexico, up to headquarters up in DC, from a guy in Silver City who had gone to an estate sale in Douglas, Arizona, and picked this book up in a box of other stuff that he had.
No, back it up. It's all blurry. It's all blurry. Is that a original picture?
That is an original picture of him and his wife.
Oh my God,
And the
that's
lady that this
pure
book,
gold.
and the lady and a picture of, so that's him and his wife and the lady that they signed this book to. What's even better than that?
It gets better.
This is a postcard written by Jeff Milton that was in the book.
Oh my gosh. November 27th, 1940?
1945.
45. Wow.
It was written to this. And
takes your breath away.
Well, I showed this off when I was at the academy, and I was doing a kind of a historical lesson for class 1217. And I said, the cool thing about this is I can hold and touch the foundations of the agency that I work for. I can hold it in my hand. And this is me passing this torch to you as the new agents and the new generation that's going forward. Yes. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here is keep that, like you said, strengthen the thread.
Yeah, strengthen that thread because it is there and it is strong. It might be a bit frayed, it might be a little bit worn out, like our equipment always has been, and
say like most Border Patrol agents at the end of their career.
Yeah, pretty much. But I feel like I've been to church, Bear. I feel like the Spirit has just lifted me. I'm so excited to see what we're gonna, the things we're gonna talk about, the things we're gonna experience, and what you just showed me right there, man. To me, like I said, I haven't put the work in you have put in, but I love Jeff Milton since the moment I read about him, and then when you came into my life and really, enriched my life by bringing Jeff Milton alive to me. And I hope and I pray we can do that for every agent in the patrol, throughout the patrol.
Oh yeah,
and great things are coming.
Oh yeah, and it, like I said, that like we need to get a coin going. We need to get them t-shirts going again. And all the things. And get Rodney Washburn on this, and get Cliff and get Chief Bonko and all. It would be so cool to just all of us sit in a room and just discuss, not just like you said, it's one of those when you sit there in Chief Bonko's office, like when I used to sit in his office, like just the stuff, and you're just what is that? What is that?
It's got to be like a shrine in there, of just, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was, and he was so like, oh yeah, it'll be fun and it'll be interesting.
I predict that one day, come hell or high water, Bear, we're gonna hear these words from Cliff Gill. Jeff Milton was the very first Border Patrol agent in the history of the United States Border Patrol.
We might have to buy him a drink for that one.
Well, if we 2, 3, whatever it takes.
Well, hopefully, like you said, with we're close to the 100th and all the people that are going to be involved in this, and in the 100th and the things that the patrol has going, but also it's going to be interesting to see what Forbo has going for the 100th, the museum has going, the Border Patrol Foundation, what they have going, all these people that like this rich, and this just, you think about it, you're like, okay, we're 100, and the history that we have that we don't even tap into is legendary.
Yes.
And you're talking about you think about the Marine Corps, you think about the Navy and the Army and history, you think about the Coast Guard or the Customs Service.
You can't divide the Marine Corps from its history.
Yeah.
All of us pray to Chesty, even now retired, I still pray to Chesty Puller every night. Okay, I still pray, but let's keep them hungry and keep them going, and we're gonna get and this is just the beginning, right? Of what we're gonna be delving into. So, Bear, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your effort, everything you've done.
There's a lot more I'm gonna be doing. So,
and God willing, and the creek don't rise, you're gonna be even busier in the future, because I personally don't believe you can celebrate the centennial properly without giving this man his place in it,
and going and finding some artifacts that people are willing to let us have for the 100th to display.
Yeah, but I get the feeling somehow you've already made a few arrangements in that department. But again, we give away too much right now.
I'm just looking forward to some of these things and hoping that the patrol proper will take advantage of that kind of stuff.
Well, we're gonna kick him in the balls to get it done.
We'll see what happens.
All right. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend, brother.
Do, brother. Be good, man. Be safe.
All right. You too.
All right.
So, what'd you think? And this is only the briefest taste of the unbelievably epic and cool things you're about to learn about our history, heritage, and legacy of the United States Border Patrol, with a few shenanigans along the way. Bear will be back next week. Follow Old Patrol HQ on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and visit my store full of the most unique and exclusive Old Patrol gear at oldpatrolhq.bigcartel.com. Till next time, honor first, honor always, or no honor at all.